Today's guests are tackling the staffing dilemma that businesses face with a unique twist: gig workers. But be careful, call their team's employees, and you'll find yourself in the middle of a heated misclassification debate. They're here to share how they're shaking up the industry one independent contractor at a time. Welcome to Talk Tech Live. I'm Chris Heffernan. I'm here in the Delivered studio, and we all know that hiring has become a big pain point. So let's talk about staffing with on-demand talent. I have David Pickerell from GigSafe. They ensure that driver onboarding compliance, handling payments, and managing regulatory requirements. I also have Mitch Cantino from GigSmart that connects businesses with on-demand workers. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
First, let me introduce today's donation dish. When you hear this word from David or Mitch, we'll make a donation to a charity. And at the end of the show, if you comment how many times you heard that word, you're entered in for a Talk Tech Live swag box. All right, let's kick things off with a big question from a restaurant operator for Mitch.
How can GigSmart quickly help me find reliable workers to fill last-minute shifts or during high-demand periods?
Absolutely. So what GigSmart allows you to do, and restaurants across the country to do, is connect directly with a pool of over 1.3 million workers. Now, do you need 1.3 million workers? No. Maybe you need one, maybe you need five, any given day. What GigSmart allows you to do is to connect with this pool, vet them through questionnaires, messaging, you can call, etc., and choose the workers that you want to work with. Show up, work. If they're a great fit, you can favorite them, add them to custom worker groups, and next time you have a need, you're instantly connecting with them within minutes and getting them on site, whether it's a no-call, no-show or a surge in demand. But essentially what it allows you to do is build this pool of people so when needs arise, you can bring them back quickly, and it handles whether you need background checks, payment processing, insurance, etc., so you can hire and work with them without any concerns.
It's funny, like as you're saying, like you can build this like list. I'm thinking of like that old school like Rolodex, right? Like, oh, my dishwasher called out. Let me like thumb through and find, Mark who came in. He washed dishes last week. So it's kind of like having just a Rolodex of talent right at your hands.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's wild if you talk to a lot of restaurant managers today, the amount of them that are still texting individually workers of, hey, are you free tonight? Hey, so-and-so called off. Can you come in? For their own employees. GigSmart has allowed, you to connect with millions of external workers with ease, instead of having to do that and get responses. You get 5 people saying, yes, they can come in, and then you really only need 1. It handles all of that for you. Blast it out to your pool of workers, confirms who's available, they show up, get directions, track their time, etc., and really streamlines that process.
Yeah, and like I can see a world where this applies like not only to like the brick and mortar restaurant, like catering, large orders come in, they're not all the time. Wedding, and events and, different staffings for that. A bartender for just an event on Saturday. And I think it really promotes the sharing economy where people want that flexibility, right? So you probably see people on the platform working the similar job for multiple businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we saw and intended when we built GigSmart was we never wanted to be the something specific app. We just wanted to be a work app. And the reason for that is workers, the same person who's doing delivery can wash dishes, can help set up for an event, etc. They shouldn't need to have 4 or 5 different apps for that, and businesses don't want to have 4 or 5 different platforms that we're working through for each position. And so what we've allowed is, hey, yeah, you can build that pool, and maybe it's the same person, or maybe it's different people across all these various jobs, and that's why we allow you to put them in various pools of maybe, hey, here's my server group that I've built up, or here's my catering event staff that I've built up. You can actually hire just from those pools as needed as well once you've added them.
Yeah, that's great. And I know the restaurants are really facing that crunch with getting people in the door, right? Like getting people in the door to both buy and to work there. It's almost like a chicken and the egg. It's great to be able to pull a bunch of customers in, but if you don't have the staff there to make the orders for them, that's a problem. And then it kind of turns, if you have the staff in there to make them, whether they're gig or labor, then you have to get the orders where they're going, right? And that's kind of where, David, you come into play, where you can help get drivers on board for brands to deliver things. And, thinking about Mitch's model there, I mean, he could be staffing labor for, those events, for meal prep companies, or really anything, right? Any job, it seems. And then if they need to get the stuff moved somewhere, that's where you could come into play. So how can using a independent contract model for drivers versus needing to worry about like hiring and staffing, your traditional like pizza drivers work out for a restaurant?
Yeah, I think, really what we're trying to do with GigSafe is just try to make it as easy as possible for companies to, onboard, credential, insure, and pay 1099 workers, right? So I think, I think it's complementary to something like Mitch is working on, right? So if you end up needing your own sort of pool of 1099 workers, you'd be able to use our system to do that. Right? I think really our system is rooted in the idea that, a lot of gig workers are used to an Uber or DoorDash type onboarding experience. And when we went and worked with sort of local restaurants, local carrier companies, regional companies, etc., their onboarding flow and post-onboarding flow, like what it took between being recruited to getting on the road, was too cumbersome, right? So we found that, for every 100 drivers that made it to someone's system, only 2 would make it all the way through. And especially, I think there's a hidden cost to that, right? The hidden cost is the good workers who don't make it through. So really, that's what we've set out to do, is just make it, how can you help onboard and get that driver on the road really as quickly as possible, in the most modern experience as possible.
That's exactly right. I think it's making it frictionless, right? So you got to make it easy, whether you're onboarding that dishwasher or that server or that driver. It needs to be easy for them to get on the platform. But I think more important than that too, let me know if you guys disagree or agree, is keeping that worker, right, on the platform, keeping them active on your system so they're available for the businesses, and making sure that the businesses are, treating them right, to make sure that they want to come back and they want to work there. So I think, what are a couple ways that we can make sure that the brands, right, like we can give everybody the best technology in the world, but if they're not using it the right way, then it's going to make for a friction-filled onboarding and a bad experience once they're on there. So like, what are a couple ways that the brands could make it easier for the worker to get and stay on? What do you think, Mitch?
Yeah, I think, one of the key things first off to highlight is there is zero fee and no disincentive on GigSmart side for businesses to hire these workers that they connect with as W-2 employees. So if you find a worker that you love and you want to bring them on full time and they want to come on full time, no barriers to that. We call that a win. Great connection made. We're happy for everybody. Our job as the platform is to make it easier to work with the technology and through the platform than ultimately maybe it even is to work directly, or to call up your local temp agency, right? I want it to be easier for you to connect with somebody through GigSmart than it is to call them yourself, call your temp agency, etc. And so that's why we create no barriers of, hey, if you want to hire them and they want to be hired, go ahead. Now, why does that not happen every day? As a business, are you able to pay people same day? Are you able to commit to a certain schedule? Does the worker want to commit to a payroll schedule or hey, I've got to commit to X number of hours a week versus on a platform, I can just pick and choose. I'm a dishwasher today, I'm doing concessions at an arena tomorrow, etc. So, just want to make it clear of this is really, we encourage, hey, if you find somebody great and you want to hire them, go ahead and do it. But you've got to have that match of both sides want it, right? And that doesn't happen quite as often as you think, right? Sometimes the work goes, man, I'd love to work here, W-2 full time, but they don't have that open position. Sometimes it's the other way of, hey, I've worked with this worker 100 times. I'd really like to hire them, but they won't let me hire them because they want that flexibility. So for the businesses, though, some of the things that I think is helpful to know is when you start bringing on temporary, contractors, it's going to highlight processes in your organization that may not be working efficiently, but you've just learned to work around them, right? Like, hey, this is just something that we do here. We kind of train everybody on it, and you get used to it over time. Well, if you're bringing in a lot of new people and it's their first time and they're only going to be there for one shift ever, that's really going to bring to light, hey, we've got some inefficiencies here, and it's going to make it so they're not as effective. And so if you're thinking about bringing on temporary contractors and working in the gig economy, I'd strongly suggest you evaluate, is there something in here that's inefficient in our process that once we have somebody new who's looking at it any given day, it's really going to be a problem. Try and resolve those before you have them come on. And then giving those temporary workers clear instructions, repeatable processes, and working with partners who can help you understand those things of, hey, GigSmart works with thousands of clients. We can tell you which ones we've seen have success with things like posting a consistent number of shifts so they know this isn't maybe just a one-time opportunity. There's additional work if I do get selected. Having good instructions. You're going to go here, you're going to show up, you're going to do this, so that way that you're not having to answer that so many times. Really allows for everybody to be more successful, right? As the business, they're being way more efficient when they show up, and the workers, they're having a great experience versus nobody likes to show up and go, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, right? It's awkward, it's uncomfortable for everyone of, hey, just I want to get to work and start doing things, right?
Yeah, and that's going to make for a better experience for everybody. If you're bringing in, like you said, temp work and they're only there for a shift or a week, if you have to spend time babysitting them, then what was the point of having them there for that work anyway? So that's definitely a key to making sure that it is successful using temp work or gig work. And then I think really that brings into light like what is important for the business to do. And then David, what do you think like independent contractors are looking for in like benefits from these gig work? Like Mitch talked about like quick pay, like obviously independent contractors are used to that, but what else are these gig workers looking for that maybe a traditional W-2 employment couldn't handle for them?
Yeah, I just want to sort of just double tap on what Mitch said, which I very much agree with. At the end of the day, the workers care about dollars in pockets is number one, right? And also doing good, meaningful work that they like to do, right? So I really love what Mitch said just now about the fact that if folks do want to go work for a customer, they can go at no cost. But generally, you keep the workers on GigSmart by providing good, consistent work and fast pay, right? So I just, kudos to that. I love what you said there. Really on my end, I sort of go back to those two philosophies too, right? Dollars in pockets is king, right? So I think really that's, before we get into specific benefits we work on, I think that's the big one on us. Dollars in pockets, meaning we can help our customers pay drivers same day, next day, a variety of different options, but faster is always better. And we have float for our customers to be able to pay faster if they would like. The second one also is just frankly saving businesses and their contractors money, right? So I view us for some of our customers like a PEO for 1099 workers. So we actually go and bulk buy commercial auto insurance. We go and bulk buy occupational accident insurance, general liability, all these insurance lines that are sort of a major line item on running a business that engages 1099 workers. Right. So what we found is because one, our system ensures compliance for all of our customers, and two, we're able to bulk buy it. What we find is, we have a commercial auto policy that's 30 to 40% cheaper than most people would be able to find on their own. And to me, that's sort of a major moving part because that cost is in some way or another generally passed down to the driver, right? So being able to pay drivers more is always king. Beyond that, and I know GigSmart has this too, is like having occupational accident insurance and making drivers aware of that, I think is very important. I think actually not a lot of workers know that they have, the 1099 workers know that they have this coverage, right? And I think highlighting that's important. And as always, we have sort of this plethora of other, gas discounts, tire discounts, all of that sort of stuff that I call sort of like lower their working cogs. But sort of flipping the question on its head, I think the most important thing at the end of the day is just dollars in pockets, right? So what can we do to empower folks to run their business efficiently, to pay workers more?
Yeah, no, and you touched on something that's important too, like the OA, the occupational accidental insurance, and it's basically like a workers' comp for gig workers if you boil it down, right? And I think that kind of loops me into the next piece, and it's kind of fighting that nomenclature that companies are here to take advantage of gig workers. I think the biggest problem that gig workers have is, not getting paid what they were supposed to be and stuff. So that kind of loops me into the question that we have for you, David, from Delivery Driver. So let's get that up for you.
How does GigSafe ensure I get paid on time and that my onboarding process is smooth?
Thanks. I recognize. Hey, Steve, that's a good question. On my end, what we learned is we actually used to run an initiative called ParaWorks, where we would help companies sort of like a specific, I would say sort of one small slice similar to sort of a GigSmart, where we would sort of introduce companies to workers to take specific shifts, right, or specific opportunities. And I think what we found was most of the companies we worked with weren't able to pay faster even if they would have liked. A little bit of backstory. What we ended up doing is actually sort of fronting that money, and that caused a whole bunch of headaches for us as a company. So we sort of reevaluated our approach to that. But really what we do for our customers now with GigSafe is they have the ability to hit pay to a worker whenever they want. That money actually gets paid instantly in most cases, pushed to debit to the worker. Then the company is sort of invoiced for that payment over time. Right, so if they want to pay us back the same day, that's great. If they want to pay us 5 days later, that's great. There's a little bit of a fee for that. But really the way we've architected that payment system allows the company to pay the driver faster and then sort of maintain a balance and pay us back later for that. Right, so we just make it as easy as possible for companies to be able to pay faster there. In terms of how do we ensure sort of onboarding is faster, onboarding is quick, I think really we took a look at what our drivers on the major gig systems used to, right? So I'd worked at Uber in an old life, and getting a worker onboarded quickly and onto that first trip was the most important factor that we saw as sort of a driver operations team, right? So taking some of that learnings, we built what I call, a bunch of these purposeful small decisions that I think make a really big difference. So we've built a responsive web app that you don't need to download an app for, but it's still a beautiful experience. We try to catch errors at the point. So if you scan an ID and it's wrong, we reject it at the point of that. We also do small things such as we found that zooming in onto a DocuSign and filling in information led to a lot of errors. So we actually extract that, have you fill it in a form first, then it pre-populates the DocuSign and you sign it. But I think it actually is just constantly looking at that flow, constantly seeing what's working or not working for workers and constantly tweaking that, basically. But really, our goal is to get a motivated driver able to do the onboarding in 10 or 15 minutes, really.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I think a lot of gig workers out there, specifically drivers, but I think in general, because the gig space isn't new to staffing, right? It's just becoming more as staffing becomes harder to get your traditional employees. And I think there's just a lot out there with these apps taking advantage of the gig workers. So it's important to make sure that they're paid right, they're paid on time. And with companies like what you guys have, being that middleman, when that gig worker isn't paid, it isn't going to necessarily reflect poorly on the business that did it, because they used your system. They connected with that brand through you. So making sure that, the driver or that worker is taken care of is super important. And there's lots of great benefits to the gig workers, right? We talked about them here. They can scale with your business, compliance, cheaper insurance. But we also have to be aware of the differences between a W-2 and between a contractor. So there's certain things that you can do with a contractor that you can't do with a W-2 and vice versa, or you're going to end up in a little bit of hot water. So that's going to take us into our game for the show. And this game is called Compliant or Misclassification. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the guests a question, and they're going to answer at the same time if they think it's compliant or a misclassification, and then we'll find out why. These are just some tips and tricks that restaurants or businesses can use to make sure that they're using those independent contract gig workers the right way. All right, you guys ready to play compliant or misclassification?
Let's do it.
All right, so compliant or misclassification. Detailed independent contract agreements are essential to avoid misclassification issues.
Compliant, although you need to be careful about what you say, right? In the independent contractor agreement, but compliant.
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that everything's right there up front and keeps it going. All right, the next one, compliant or misclassification. Using a dedicated gig staffing platform is the best way to manage schedules and maintain compliance.
Compliant. Yeah, so when we talk about compliance and misclassification, obviously it's a complicated world, and so we'll give our best advice, but I'll put one of those disclaimers that you see on the bottom of every CNBC commercial, or please consult with your legal team. This is not considered legal advice. But ultimately, when we talk about how to best interact with the independent workforce, platforms like GigSmart and GigSafe are built to allow you to schedule, pay, etc., in a compliant manner, right? We are not, we'd be out of business if every company that worked with us, we were setting up for failure to be sued. And what we found is, quite honestly, we talk about how do you, the benefits to the workers. GigSmart does not vet the workers. I know, Dave, I don't believe GigSafe is vetting the workers. And what I mean by that is we are not confirming these people have the skills they say they have. We are not interviewing them. Chris, I have a team of 30 people with 1.3 million workers on the platform. I have not met them. Our people have not called them. We are not interacting with them directly at all. We're building technology for them. But what we do actually, do to support the workers is we vet the businesses, right? So if a business comes on and they're trying to hire a remote assistant and they're coming out of, God knows where in the world, and there's no website, or, their credit card's failing, right? Those businesses can't work, can't post opportunities on GigSmart. We make sure that the workers will be paid by doing things like pre-authorizing credit cards and tracking workers' time, so that way if there's a dispute, we can show, hey, that their time that was clocked was from X to Y. So platforms like GigSmart essentially allow you to have support when there are issues, and they're not always malicious. I can tell you, we have many businesses where there's just manager A who was on site and manager B who was maybe reviewing timesheets, and they didn't talk to each other. Well, if you're not working through a platform as a worker, you go, how do I get up the chain to get in contact with who I need to help me get paid for my time worked, right? Well, platforms like GigSmart facilitate that for you, whether it's connecting you with them and providing contact information, or allowing you to submit dispute timesheets. So ultimately, there's always room for improvement, and we're actively monitoring the regulatory environment and working with agencies to make sure that we are assisting our clients in being compliant. But again, working directly outside of platforms, it's just going to open everybody up to risks. Sometimes when you do that.
Yeah, and it's funny, as soon as you said that, I was thinking like right on the bottom of the screen, like non-attorney spokesperson, but no, that's perfect. And I mean, there's a big risk if you do something wrong. Now you owe back taxes and wages and penalties. So, nobody really wants any of that. So next is compliant or misclassification, providing feedback and coaching to gig workers, risks crossing the lines into employee territory.
Hard to think of like how compliant or miscompliant to that, right? I think we're both like,
Yeah, I think there's an element of training and moderation there, Chris, that is hard to answer, right? So saying this is what you're going to be doing and giving instructions is a little different than management, right? Of, hey, I need you to help set this up, versus I'm micromanaging you and moderating your work and et cetera. So I think the way we always describe it personally, David, you can talk as well, is clear instructions is not the same as management. And so we encourage providing clear instructions, but when you start talking about actually managing a worker, that's where you're potentially running the risk of blurring the lines of, is this a contractor or an employee?
No, there's like cleared instructions on how you want, what the end result, expected end result is, basically, right? Rather than this is how you should do it. It's more about this is my expectations for what I want you to do.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I want done. How you get there is up to you. I'm not performance managing that, but as long as we end up here, then you did a good job. And then for our last question, compliant or misclassification? Regular legal consultations are necessary to ensure gig staffing practices stay aligned with current regulations.
Compliant. Yeah, really, I think, the world is always changing, right? If we look at, for example, California, I think this is something we're dealing with a lot of our customers right now. Prop 22 is passed, Prop 22 is paused, Prop 22 is found, compliant by the courts, etc., right? And that's just one state, right? So if you're a company that's working in multiple states, it's hard to keep on up to date with all of these. I think the other thing I've learned, and I think sort of Mitch will agree with this, is like, there's my reading of the law, then there's what the lawyer actually tells you, right, or talking to the legal team tells you. So really, I think that's one of the benefits of working with someone like us is like we're tracking all of these in all the different states, and we help advise the companies we work with on this, right? Because, let's rewind a couple of years back into me founding the company. I tried to track all of these, and it's impossible, right? It's like you might know that something happened, but what specifically does that mean? What specifically does that mean for you? Working with the right counsel, set of counsel, the right partners is really important for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for these bigger brands that are in multiple states, right? Like you said, California with Prop 22. If you're in California and Arizona, how you work with an independent contractor might differ. So it's important to know those things, or at least work with someone who knows those things, and who's better to do that than someone that does the legal work themselves. So lots of great insights there, guys, on compliance and on just using gig staffing in general. Thanks so much for being such a good sport during the game and taking those customer questions. We covered a lot of key points, from navigating compliance and working with independent contractors to using technology for more efficient communication and scheduling. There's definitely a lot of takeaways here that any business could implement to tackle the staffing challenges that we see today and really improve their operations. Thanks so much for joining me today, Mitch and David.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks everyone for watching, and don't forget to count up those donation dishes and comment for your chance for that swag kit. Keep an eye out for next week's episode. I'll see you then.